Hi class, and welcome to a tutorial for how to sew the bodice. Here we have the front and back pattern. I will also be using my straight ruler and my Fusion X pen for my markings. Before I start cutting my pattern, I double check to make sure I have all my notches and all my drill holes in place. That just holds me accountable when I'm sewing to make sure that I'm hitting all the right points that I need to hit. Once I make sure that I have all the correct markings, I am now going to cut my fabric. Remember that your center front is on fold. So I begin by folding my muslin to make sure that I cut both sides of my pattern when I am cutting my front bodice. So now that I have folded my fabric, I am going to take my center front pattern with the center front folded, making sure I have that part, that extra one allowance. It's not really an allowance, but that extra fabric that I have there, it's not part of my pattern. So I make sure I tuck that away, and then I pin my pattern to my muslin. After pinning all my major corners and points, I start cutting my muslin. Make sure, it is very important that you do not lift your fabric off the table when you are cutting. You should not lift it up and be cutting in the air. Your pattern and your fabric should always be laying down flat on your table when you're cutting. Now that I'm done with that, I am going to go ahead and cut my back pattern from this. I'm also going to leave my fabric folded so that I can go ahead and cut the two sides of my back. Here I'm just trying to figure out the best way to fold my fabric so that I get the most from it, and I can use the rest or whatever that's left over for something else later. You have to save fabric. Make sure also that when you are cutting your center back, you do not fold your 1-inch seam. That is actually part of your pattern, unlike the front that was folded. In fact, with your front, you can actually cut off that piece if you'll forget, but just make sure you leave your 1-inch for your back out, because that is the center back seam allowance. Now that I am done cutting my pattern pieces, I am going to go ahead and notch my fabric, making sure I just like cut little dashes wherever my notches are on my pattern. I'm basically transferring my notches from my pattern onto my muslin that I am going to sew. Now that I have notched everything, I'm going to use my awl to drill into my muslin so that I can transfer my drill holes from my pattern to my muslin. Now that I'm done transferring all my markings, I go ahead and unpin my pattern from my muslin, and then I'm going to transfer all my drill. I'm basically going to like draw my dart legs on so it's easy for me to sew and it just makes it more visible. Remember that your darts actually don't end where the drill holes are. They end half an inch above the drill, I mean below the drill hole. So when you're drawing in your dart, if you do draw in your dart, just remember that your darts end half an inch past the drill hole. So this is my back pattern and my front patterns laid out in muslin. So this is what I'm going to be sewing. The pattern is gone, but I've transferred everything to muslin. So now let's sew. I'm basically going to be sewing over the line that I drew, making sure that it matches on both sides. And pay attention to where my dart hole is. Can you see where the hole is? But notice how like the end of my dart is half an inch away. Another thing to remember is this is actually the wrong side of the fabric. So this is the part that we are not going to see. It's going to be hidden. Now that I'm done sewing my front darts, I am going to go ahead and sew my back darts. So that is my shoulder dart and also my waist dart for my back pieces. Now that my darts are all sewn and done, I am going to press them facing the center of the body. This is what my front looks like, and this is what my back pieces look like. Now I am simply pressing my darts towards the center of my body. Notice how my eraser marks, not my eraser, my marker marks are basically disappearing as I press. That's because that's the type of pen I use. So you definitely don't want to use a pen or any regular thing on your garment, anything to mark your garment. Make sure it's either chalk or an erasable pen. Once I'm done pressing my darts towards the right direction, I go ahead and I pin my seams. So this is me pinning my shoulder seam, and then I pin my side seam. And then I am going to sew all my pieces together at my side seam and my shoulder seam. So this is, I basically sewed all my seams already, but this is just to illustrate. This is me sewing my side seam. And once I'm done with this seam, I'm just going to head over to my ironing board once again. I'm going to press my seams open, and I am done with my bodice. A tip for when you're pressing, make sure that your garment is flat on the board and you don't have any fabric folded or tucked underneath, so it doesn't just, you don't want to press any permanent creases into your garment. So just make sure that your garment is nice and flat before you go ahead and press. And yeah, use some steam because you want to keep your seam pressed open permanently. And that's all for today. We'll see you, or I'll see you at the next video.